In the last segment, we left off with the reading of the Declaration of Utrecht of September 24th of 1889, where the bishops who authored it declared their unity together and their belief. It was their definition of who they were and truly what the communion of all Catholics stood for. How to come to the United States. After the churches had banded together as the Utrecht Union of Churches, in 1908, they had established a mission in Great Britain. And a few years after that, in 1913, an Austrian nobleman who was made bishop came to the United States, and his name was Rudolf Burgess. Bishop Burgess planted the roots of old Catholicism in this country, and in the process he consecrated two priests underneath him, one Henry Carmel Carfora, and the other William Brothers. From the formerly centralized leadership of Burgess, the church in the United States evolved to a more decentralized polity, consisting of self-governing dioceses, frankly following closely the concepts of Saint Ignatius of Antioch in terms of how he viewed churches as a communion of communities, each laboring together to proclaim the gospel. Now, there was another old Catholic priest by this time, Joseph Villate, and he established a firm foundation of a congregation in Wisconsin. And in time, he too was made a bishop under the authority of the Patriarch of Antioch. At the time, it was a Syrian Orthodox community. But you have to understand, from the early days, at least in the United States, the old Catholics over here had remained independent, and they were subject to ecclesial bullying from day one by their Roman and Episcopalian counterparts. These small congregations of old Catholics from day one had to fight for their survival against great opposition, much to the consternation of the Romans and the Episcopalians of the day. At that time, and through to this day, most old Catholic priests are volunteers. We came to this country with virtually nothing in the early 1900s, and we've had to eke out an existence of small missions, one after another, throughout this country in a very decentralized fashion. So, between volunteer priests having not just their church job, but outside jobs to support themselves, it really was a challenge then and a challenge now. And it went forward hand in glove with the desire of the people to create these missions against all odds. We owe much to the old Catholic bishops who came here in the very beginning. We owe much to the priests who volunteered their time outside their secular jobs to preach the gospel. To preach the gospel as it was meant to be, in my opinion, in the early days of the church. Hopefully unimpeded by prevailing politics or political trends. I don't think any church is devoid of politics. But the advantage of the old Catholics is they did not have a monolithic hierarchy to please. They only had the gospel, the faithful, and their understanding of the traditions of the church and the way the church was for the first 1,000 years, keeping to the original declaration. The unfortunate thing, of course, and I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but commensurate with, as we say, bivocational priests that had outside jobs and small communions, there was also a lacking of ecclesiastical discipline. And this has proven to be a problem through a number of improvident ordinations to spread the faith. To put it plainly, some bishops and some priests have just flat gone off the reservation because they aren't held accountable. This is a very big problem in Old Catholicism as it's practiced in the United States. But I don't see it any different than how the early church developed for the first 100 or 200 or 300 years. I mean, the first council of the church wasn't until 325. So, for 300 some odd years, the church struggled. Lord only knows the difficulties that these new apostles had and the people who followed them had. So, what do we believe? We believe and we try to practice as best we can the faith as it was taught by the church from apostolic times, and the faith as it was taught and handed down and affirmed by the 7 ecumenical councils. We try our best to teach the faith as expressed in the Declaration of Utrecht. In part, I think, we try to look with kind eyes on our mainly Roman brothers and sisters who do not see it the way we see it. But we also have to look on kind eyes with each other, because within the Old Catholic community, there are many different approaches to liturgy. There are many different approaches to polity. Some have just flat departed from the ancient ways of the church and gone to a more Romanesque way. Some have gone to a more Episcopalian way involving more of the laity. Some have stayed Orthodox. Ours seems to be a more Orthodox approach to Scripture than a Roman dogmatic one, and our governance seems to be more Orthodox than a hierarchical Roman way of doing things. We borrow heavily from both traditions. How do we differ from Rome? We differ from Rome in a number of different ways. How do we differ from the Episcopalians? How do we differ from the Orthodox? I think what I'm going to do is save that for the next installment. God bless you.